It's so good to see each and every one of you this morning. I told this story last week, but I'm sure there's one person here that didn't hear it, so I'm going to say it again. About 6 years ago, Matt and Heather Jones, Matt was a deacon at Crief Hall, and they started attending here at Chapel Hill and let us know they wanted to place membership. And I called Matt on the phone, and I said, Matt, I'm so glad you and your family are going to be here at Chapel Hill. We're going to be blessed to have you here, but I just want to apologize to you personally. He said, for what? And I said, you heard Bill Watkins every Sunday, and now you have to listen to me. And he laughed, but I was being sincere. I was trying to be a little bit funny, but I was being sincere. Bill Watkins has been one of my favorite preachers ever since I was old enough to know what a preacher was. I can still remember 15 years ago him speaking at Estes in Henderson when I was a college student at Freed and remembering every word that he was speaking. And so just as much as I was sorry for Matt and Heather 6 years ago, I am even more excited that he's going to be with us for our VBS. And so appreciate Brother Bill so much. You could talk about him and his accolades for a long time, but he's someone who loves the Lord. He loves to preach. And he loves God's people. And I'm so excited that he's going to be with us here for VBS. We've been telling you for weeks, but if you're still waiting to encourage that person, that family to be with us, please do so. And they'll hear an excellent lesson. And of course, their children will also too. So thankful, Brother Bill.
I'm not sure what this is, but I'm going to set it right there. If it rings, I need an elder to answer this. Whatever that is, it's going to be long distance if it rings. So just make sure that you do that. It's so good to be here. I love what I've seen already this morning. Skylar, with the choice of songs and the way that he leads, is so inspirational. Austin, you did a great job reading. Hunter, a magnificent job in taking care of the Lord's Supper and the contribution. I think about Matt and Heather, who I still haven't forgiven for moving down here. But no, I love them and their family. And for Don and Lynn, who have just made such a difference in my life and the life of my whole family. If you don't like Don, you have to like Lynn. So I can just tell you that she's just absolutely special. They're a wonderful family. And it's great to be here with you. This is my first time to ever be here at Chapel Hill. And I'm so thankful that you've given me the opportunity to do it. We're going to be talking this week, all throughout the week, about evangelism. And this morning, I want to talk about the motive for evangelism. In the Bible class, I'm going to be talking about the message of evangelism. And tonight, I'm going to be talking about the mission of evangelism. And I hope that all of that is going to get us on track for the rest of the week. And that's where I really want to start with this. Let me just go to some passages of Scripture to introduce what I'm going to be talking about this morning. In John chapter 12, Jesus said in verses 32 and 33, "And I, if I be lifted up, will draw all men to myself." And he said this, signifying by what death he would die. In Acts chapter 2, verse 36, in that first gospel sermon, Peter said, "Let all the house of Israel know assuredly that God has made this same Jesus, whom you've crucified, both Lord and Christ." In Romans chapter 5, verses 6 through 10, while we were still without strength, in due season Christ died for the ungodly. For scarcely for a righteous man will one die. Peradventure for a good man someone would even dare to die. But God commended his own love toward us, and that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. Much more than being justified by his blood shall we be saved from wrath through him. For if when we were enemies, we were reconciled to God through the death of his Son, much more, now being reconciled, shall we be saved by his life. Or Romans chapter 1, verse 16. "I'm not ashamed of the gospel, for it's the power of God to salvation to everyone who believes, to the Jew first and also to the Greek." Or 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verses 1 through 4. "Moreover, brethren, I declare unto you the gospel, which also I preached unto you, which also you received, wherein also you stand, by which also you were saved, if you hold fast that which I've preached unto you, unless you have believed in vain. For I delivered unto you first of all that which also I received, that Christ died for our sins according to the Scriptures, and that he was buried, and that he rose again the third day according to the Scriptures." Paul, when he wrote to the Corinthians in chapter 2, said in 1 Corinthians chapter 2, verses 1 and 2, "And I, brethren, when I came to you, did not come with excellency of speech or of wisdom, declaring unto you the testimony of God. For I determined not to know anything among you except Jesus Christ and him crucified." In Galatians chapter 2, verse 20, Paul said, I've been crucified with Christ. Nevertheless, I live, yet not I. Christ lives in me. And the life that I now live in the flesh, I live by the faith of the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me. In chapter 6 of that same book, in verse 14, he said, far be it from me that I should boast, save in the cross of the Lord Jesus Christ, by which the world was crucified to me, and I to the world. Do you need to know the motivation for evangelism? This is it. He said, the world was crucified to me. I was crucified to the world, and that's what I'm going to brag about for the rest of my life. I'm not going to brag about anything else, but I'm going to brag about the cross. I'm going to brag about what Jesus has done for me. Ephesians chapter 2, verses 14 through 16. He himself is our peace, who made both one and has broken down the middle wall of partition, having abolished in his flesh the enmity, the law of commandments contained in ordinances, so as to create in himself one new man, so making peace, that he might reconcile them both to God in one body through the cross, having put to death the enmity thereby. Well, I could go on and on and on. And if you're writing these things down, here's some scriptures to write down and look up. I'm going to take too long if I don't. Philippians chapter 2, verses 5 through 8. Colossians chapter 2, verses 13 and 14. Let me give you Hebrews chapter 2, verse 9. We behold him who's become a little lower than the angels, Jesus, because of the suffering of death, crowned with glory and honor, that by the grace of God he should taste of death for everyone. How about writing down Hebrews chapter 2, verses 14 and 15? Hebrews chapter 12, verse 2. And then this amazing statement in Revelation chapter 13, verse 8, where he speaks of the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world. That before the world was ever existing, before man ever came into being, God had planned already for his Lamb, his Son, to be slain. He knew it all the way from the beginning because he knew we would need it. He knew we would need it. What I want you to do with me for the next few moments is to look together at an event that is so significant that we call this 2025. Because it's been roughly 2,025 years since this event occurred. And that's the birth and the life and the death of Jesus Christ. Nothing has ever changed the world so significantly as that single life has changed the world. And nothing has changed the lives and hearts of people more than the cross, the death, the burial, and the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Nothing has changed the world so much as that. So what I want you to do is go back with me to those events. I know that you know that Jesus died, that he was hung on a cross. That's clear. I want you to see that a little bit differently and think about it a little bit differently over the next few moments. 3 days after Jesus was buried, the tomb was empty. The stone was rolled away. The body was gone. How do you explain that? There's been all kinds of interesting explanations over the years as to how that happened. Is this working, by the way? Can you hear me with this? Okay, because it sounds different to me, but I'm good. Okay, good. But I want you to go back with me for just a few moments and ask yourself, why was that tomb empty? Well, the soldiers spread the word because they've been told to spread it, that the disciples stole the body away. That what happened was that they came in the middle of the night and they rolled the stone away and they took the body away. And so Jesus was really dead. They just proclaimed him to be alive. Well, there's a problem with that. Number one is that there were 4 to 16 Roman soldiers outside that tomb. Roman soldiers are taken from the time that they are young adults and trained all their life for this one thing, that they can hold 6 square feet of ground against an entire oncoming army. Every one of those guys have been trained like that. I want you to think about that. And on the other hand, who's coming to get them? Well, they're the disciples. Who are they? They're fishermen, they're tax collectors, they're regular guys. They have no military training. Peter, when he tried to cut off a guy's head, only got his ear. None of them were able to get that close. They're not that good. I want you to think about these guys coming up against 4 to 16 fellas that have been trained all their life, and they have one thing in mind: don't let anybody in, don't let anybody out. And somehow they overpowered them. And they rolled away the 1 to 2 ton stone that was in front of that tomb, stole the body away. And here's the other thing that's amazing to me, is that when they came to the end of their life, Peter, who would be crucified upside down, Thomas, who would be pierced with darts in India. I think about all of these people. Every one of them could have avoided the martyr's death they'd had. And all they had to say was, we stole the body away. It really didn't happen. But in every case, when their life was on the line, they said, you'll have to kill us because this is true. Jesus really rose from the dead, and we really saw him. They're not lying. There are others who say, well, the real thing is that Jesus kind of revived. When they pierced his side and blood and water came out, it was just a flesh wound. And after 3 days in a tomb that's sealed up without water or food or air, he got better. Not only did he get better, but he rolled from the inside a 1 to 2 ton stone away from that grave and beat up those guys and ran off into the countryside. You know better. You know what the explanation is, that Jesus actually miraculously, amazingly, and in accordance with every prophecy that he gave, rose from the dead. He was raised by the power of God, and he's the Son of God. That's who he is. But what I want to focus on for the next few moments actually happened just before that. I want you to go with me back to the cross, to the crucifixion itself. And I'm going to use Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and I'll refer to the events in that without giving you all these because I think you're familiar with the things that are here. I want you to see the atmosphere of a crucifixion. When we have capital punishment in the United States, we don't allow a lot of people to come. We don't allow the news to take pictures. We don't allow that to happen. But it wasn't that way in Rome. When they used capital punishment, which was crucifixion, everybody showed up. In fact, the atmosphere wasn't anything like it is under our day. It was more like a Friday night football game. That's really what was going on there. Everybody showed up. Some of them would bring picnic lunches, and they would cheer and shout. And the reason is, this is the guy that killed my father, or this is the person that stole from us when we didn't have enough to eat ourselves. He gets what he deserves. They're cheering them on. That was the atmosphere of a crucifixion. And into that atmosphere, Jesus is inserted and crucified. So I want you to go with me for the next few moments to the cross. I don't want you to just look at it. I want you to be there. I want you to experience what Jesus experienced. I want you to feel what Jesus felt. I want you to hear what Jesus heard. I want you to see what Jesus saw. I want you to say what Jesus said. If you do that, your life's never going to be the same again. You can't ever look at this the same again. I love what was talked about in the Lord's Supper this morning. I love that entire lesson and message that he gave, because it's what we're going to be talking about over the next few moments. I want you to go with me, first of all, to the cross and ask, what did Jesus feel? When Jesus went to the cross, what did he feel? And in order to get that, I need to take you back about a week earlier, because for the last week, Jesus has been cramming as much as he can and teaching his disciples. There's a lot of stuff they still don't get. Sometimes you see frustration come through. Do you not yet understand? Oh, you have little faith. Come on. They need to learn more, but there's not a lot of time to tell them. And Jesus is trying to tell them in these last few days that he has left the things that are essential for them to know. He spends long days and long nights praying and walking and talking and teaching with his disciples. He's been in and out of the temple. He's been criticized and threatened again and again in the course of that week. He's tired. Have you ever had one of those weeks where you've worked over 80 hours and you're exhausted, and you walk in and you tell your wife as you're walking toward the bedroom, I don't want supper. I'd rather not see the kids right now. I just need to go to bed. Wake me up in about 12 hours. I'm tired. I really, really am exhausted. That's how Jesus felt when all of this started. He's already exhausted. After having instituted the Lord's Supper, they went across the Kidron Brook and up on the other side on the Mount of Olives, where he came to the Garden of Gethsemane. And he takes most of the disciples and leaves them in one place, takes Peter, James, and John a little closer, and he tells them, my soul is exceedingly sorrowful, even unto death. I think we read that a lot of times when we say, well, what made him so sorry? It's not sorrowful. That's really not a good translation. Jesus was so stressed that his body was about to die. He was telling his disciples, I feel so much stress. I think the stress itself could kill me right now. I'm exceedingly stressed to the point of death. That's where he was. He's that kind of stressed. He walks away from them and begins to pray, and Luke is the only one, the physician, is the only one who tells you that Jesus, as he was praying, had great drops of sweat, as it were, of blood coming down his forehead. You know what that means? It's an actual medical condition. When you're under incredible stress, the capillaries under the pressure begin to burst inside your forehead. And that mixes with the sweat from the sweat glands. And it looks like your whole face is bleeding. Jesus is tired and stressed beyond words. They came to take him in the garden with swords and with staves. And they took him back and forth through a series of mock trials. During those times, a number of things happened to him. They took a crown of thorns. Well, before even the crown of thorns, they blindfolded Jesus, the Jewish leaders did. And they began to beat him and spit on him and say, tell us who hit you. Prophesy. Have you ever been down and somebody just kind of sticks it in and twists it when you're really on your worst day? That's where they were. That's where they were. They take him to Pilate. Pilate has him scourged. I don't know if you know about the way that they scourge, but there was a cat of nine tails that they would use to scourge. It would be taken, and it's not just the back, the entire body is torn to pieces by it. A cat of nine tails had 9 leather straps or thongs that came out, and at the end of those were pieces of rock or of metal, sometimes of some other material, always sharp. And you would rake the body with that, hitting it as hard as you could. Eusebius records that there were people who were beaten so badly that their skin literally ripped off, that you could see the entrails inside of a person because the skin had been ripped so badly. You see, when they did this kind of beating, the Jews gave 39 stripes because they didn't want to cross 40, but the Romans only had one thing that they had to do. They told him, beat him within an inch of his life, but just don't kill him. Bring him to the point of death. And they beat him and beat him and beat him. If you happen to see some years ago, The Passion of the Christ, the hardest thing to watch in that movie was the beating. It was the worst of the things that you saw. But what I want to tell you is that the beating that Jesus received was worse than you saw in the movie, and it was horrible there. I want you to feel what it must have felt like when his skin is ripped away. And then they put a crown of thorns on his head, a reed scepter in his hand, and took a purple robe and put it around his back. They began to bow down and say, "Hail, King of the Jews." Then they took the reed scepter and beat him across the head. They still had the crown of thorns on it. It was a common practice among the Romans to take a mat and put it on the back of a person that they had just beaten, to let the blood coagulate for a time and then rip it off so that the pain gets worse. With Jesus, they used a robe. And as the blood begins to coagulate into the robe, they rip it off like taking a scab off. Do you feel what Jesus felt? After they got through with all of that, they placed a cross on Jesus and made him carry it. I don't know if it was just the cross member or if it was the entire cross. They did it both ways. Either way, that rough wood on a back laid open would have been beyond painful. It would have been torturous. Is it any wonder that Jesus stumbled on the way? They compelled Simon to carry that cross the rest of the way to the place of the skull, Golgotha. Once he was there, they would have laid the cross on the ground and then laid Jesus on the cross. And generally beginning with the left hand, the soldier would put his knee right here, and he would take a crucifixion spike. I don't know if you've seen one. I have a copy of one on my desk. It's about this long. It's not a nice, clean surgical instrument. It's rough. And at the end, the part that goes through your body is about as dull as the end of my little finger. It's not pointed at all. They'd have taken it either here in the hand, which was not the common practice, or in the wrist, which was considered a part of the hand. And a soldier that knew what he was doing with one or two blows could drive that all the way through the flesh and the tendon right into the cross. Then they would stretch out his right hand, and they would do that all over again. And then they came to the feet, which, by the way, isn't like any any painting that I've ever seen of what the cross is supposed to look like. Every time that I've seen a photograph or of somebody who's pretending to be crucified or a painting of somebody crucified, it shows feet like this with a nail down through the top of that's not the way they did it. We found enough crucified bodies now. We know that's not the way that they did it. What they would do is place the feet side by side, turn them, and bend the legs. And then through the fleshy part of the foot, they would drive a nail through both feet and into the cross. Then they would lift the cross up and drop it in the hole. Again, some historians record how that people would rip through the nails and have to be taken back down and then nailed back up to put back up. Once you're on that cross, this incredible thing happens. Once you're on the cross, you find that you begin to suffocate if you're hanging by the weight of your hands. Your diaphragm paralyzes and you can't breathe. You remember that the feet are turned sideways and bent. The legs are bent. There's a reason for that, to prolong the agony of the cross. Because when you were suffocating, you would push yourself up on that single nail through your feet in order to breathe. The problem is that when you do that, the pain is like 1,000,000 volts of electricity shooting through your body. You cannot maintain that for very long. And so then you go back between suffocation and horrible pain until you can't push yourself up anymore. And when you can't, you die quickly. By the way, that's why they broke the legs of the thieves. Once you can't push yourself back up, you die very, very quickly from suffocation. Do you feel what Jesus is feeling? Beyond that, do you feel the sins of the world? Jesus, the only innocent man to ever live, is dying for us. He who knew no sin was made to be sin for us, that we might be the righteousness of God in him. He is feeling the weight of all of our sin. Do you feel what Jesus felt? So what did Jesus hear? I'll tell you what he didn't hear. Do you remember when the disciples were out on the boat and the storm was terrible and Jesus came walking by and they were afraid and he said, "Be of good cheer, it's I." And by the way, the word "be of good cheer" is not a good translation either. The word is tharseo in the Greek and it means have courage. Have courage, it's me. That's what he was telling them. Don't be afraid, it's me. Who's telling Jesus that? Who's telling Jesus, "I'm right here with you. Don't worry. I'm here. I love you." Nobody is telling him that. You know what he's hearing instead? He's hearing the scribes and Pharisees, the people who are supposed to be understanding the entire events that are going on right at this moment. What are they doing? They're saying, "He saved others, himself he cannot save. You who would tear down the temple and build it up in 3 days, save yourself. You do that." That's what they were saying. Do you know what he was hearing? At the foot of the cross, there are soldiers who are gambling over the only piece of clothing he can call his own. What would you do, guys, if you come to your deathbed and the doctors have called in the family and your son and daughter are down at the foot of the bed and you're dying, and your son looks at your daughter and says, I just want you to know that when Dad kicks the bucket, I get the Corvette. And the daughter gets really upset about it and says, no way. She said, I've been looking at that Corvette ever since he got sick. I intend to get that. No, you don't. You get the China and the hutch and all the stuff that goes with that, but I get the Corvette. They start arguing about it while you're dying. And finally, the son reaches in his pocket, pulls out a couple of dice, and he says, hey, Dad, could you scoot over a little bit because I'm going to roll these dice. 6 and below, I get the Corvette. 7 and above, she gets the Corvette. Well, what would you do? Well, if you had enough strength, you just disown them both right then and tell them neither one of them gets a Corvette. But that's what Jesus is going through. They're gambling over his clothes while he's dying. They don't care. They don't care. What's Jesus hearing? On either side of them, common thieves. And at first, they're cursing and complaining. And finally, one of them says, leave him alone. Because the one man has been saying, if you're the Son of God, you can save us all. And he says, leave him alone. He said, he hasn't done anything to deserve this. We do. You leave him alone. But the one who wanted Jesus to be left alone can't leave him alone. He says, remember me when you come in your kingdom. I think if there was one bright spot in a terrible dark day, this is it. That there's one person in this crowd that still believes Jesus has a kingdom. And he's a thief. And he's dying right next to him. So you remember that Jesus said, today you'll be with me in paradise. What's Jesus hearing? In front of the cross, he's hearing his mama cry. That's where she's standing. That's what he's hearing. You ever heard your mama cry? When I was a little boy, we were living in Chattanooga, Tennessee. I was maybe 4 or 5 years old. Every day my dad would come home and I would meet him as he would come in through the garage into the kitchen. And every day that he came in, he would take me and he would pick me up and throw me up in the air till my head just scraped the ceiling. Now, I'll tell you, Beverly says he threw me too hard. But he would just scrape the ceiling. He would catch me on the way down. And my dad, who had a 5 o'clock shadow by 10 o'clock every morning, would take that scratchy beard and he would scratch all over my face and say, I love you. And it was a little bit of heaven. And I'd love to have that feeling all over again sometime. It was absolutely wonderful. But I remember one day that my dad came in and I met him at the door. And the first thing he did was say, go to your room, Bill. And me being me, I turned around and went to my room thinking, did I do something? I don't think he knows what I did, so I hope I'm okay. But I went back to my room. And again, me being me, as soon as I got in the room and fulfilled the letter of the law, I came right back out. And when I came out, I looked to my right, and that was where our living room was. And my dad was on his knee in front of my mother. My mother was sitting on the couch. My dad had smelling salts in his hand. And he said, I hate to tell you this. Your father just died. And my mother shrieked and cried. And she said he wasn't a Christian. She said, I'm never going to see my father again. My dad, he's lost. And she cried and cold chills went up down my back. I had nightmares for years after that of hearing my mother cry like that. We'd be in a fellowship hall. She'd be on the other side, and she laughed out loud like she cried out loud. And she would laugh, and I would think for just a second that she's crying again like that, and my heart would stop. Have you heard your mama cry? Jesus did. My son. Why are they doing this to my son? So what did Jesus see? The Bible says that there were people who were just walking by. They're always that kind of person. Have you ever noticed that on an interstate? If there's a wreck on the westbound lane, that the people in the eastbound lane all slow down? Why do they do that? They do that because they want to see the wreck. I think they just want to see. We have a morbid curiosity to see wrecks. I don't want to offend anybody if you happen to be a NASCAR fan, but I suspect that some people go to NASCAR just to see the wrecks. I'm telling you, something about it fascinates us, and it did when Jesus said, they didn't care who it was that was being crucified. They just wanted to see the event. And so they were walking by saying nothing. That's what he saw. He sees the scribes and Pharisees, the Bible says, wagging their heads and saying, he saved others, he cannot save himself. Isn't that something? They're saying, if you can't hear us, at least you can see us. We beat you, Jesus. We won, you lost. He sees soldiers gambling over his clothing. He sees thieves on either side of him. He sees his disciples frightened and getting out toward the edge of the crowd for fear that it might happen to them. He sees his mama crying. And then he sees the sun go black. And he knows that God himself has turned his back, at least for now, that he has been given the condemnation of separation from God. So what does Jesus say? I want you to think about what Jesus said. I think I know what I would have said. I would have said, hey, you Pharisees, you guys are saying, if I'm really the Son of God, come down off the cross. I'd just teleported down off the cross. I'd have rained down a little lightning on them. There'd have been nothing left but the soles of their sandals. There'd have been a hole where they had been standing. And I would have said, look, guys, they did that. That's what they get. You say another word, that's what you'll get. I'm dying for you. So you just shut up until I get through. I'm going to get up here and I'm going to die, but I don't want to hear another word out of you. You understand? I would have preached them a sermon. But not Jesus. Not Jesus. He said, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. Wow. When he looks down from the cross, he looks at us and he says, Father, forgive him and forgive her and forgive her and him. Forgive them. They have no idea what they're doing. If I live to be 1,000,000, I'll never understand that kind of love, but I will thank God for it every single day of my life. I'm so thankful that he wanted us forgiven. He looked to the thief and he said, today you'll be with me in paradise. He saw his mama and John, the disciple that he loved, and he said, woman, behold your son. Son, behold your mother. Is there anything here that indicates that Jesus is the victim? He's the one forgiving. He's the one taking care of people. He's the one who's making sure that everybody can be where they possibly can be in the right place. Jesus is not the victim of the cross. He didn't go there because somebody forced him. He went because he loved us. So what does he say? He says, I'm thirsty. When he first got on the cross, they put vinegar and gall on a sponge and gave it to him. And when he realized what it was, he refused that because it's like Demerol. It takes a little of the edge off the pain. He didn't want that. But now he's thirsty, so they put wine on a sponge and give it to him, and he takes it. Jesus says, my God, why have you forsaken me? Have you ever been praying and it feels like your prayer's not getting past this ceiling? Have you ever felt like God's so distant that nobody's listening when your worst day is happening? If that's the case, Jesus knows exactly how you feel. He's been there. Jesus said, it's finished. What's finished? Everything you wanted me to do. It's not a cry of defeat, it's a cry of victory. I've said everything you want me to say. I've gone everywhere you want me to go. I've done everything you want me to do. It's done. That's what Jesus said. And finally, Jesus said, Father, into your hands I commend my spirit. And having said thus, he gave up the ghost. I want you to think about what he said just a few minutes earlier. He's saying to God, I can't hear you, see you, or feel you. Why have you forsaken me? And now, at the point of death, Father, into your hands I commend my spirit. Here's what he's saying. I can't hear you. I can't see you. I can't feel you. Catch me. I'm jumping into your arms. When you can't see him, you can't feel him, and you can't hear him, he's right there. Jump into his arms. A long time ago, there was a one-room schoolhouse in West Texas where a bunch of boys would run off every teacher in the county, so they put in a national publication that they wanted a teacher. Only one person responded, and he was a little short, skinny, bald-headed guy from Boston who wore really thick glasses. And they knew that the first time the boys saw him, they would probably break him in two, especially Big Tom, Big Tom had been the smartest mind in the 4th grade for 5 years. He was unbelievable. He could run anybody off. And when they saw him, the boys said, boy, the first time we put a snake in his desk, the first time that we put a tack in his seat, the first time that we run him off, that man's done. And they laughed when they saw him. And he said, boys, this is going to be a good year. And they all laughed. He said, it's a good year because we're going to have rules. And they laughed even louder. He said, oh, no, I'm not making up any rules. He said, you guys get to make up the rules and you guys get to make up the punishments. Well, they thought about that and thought that might work. He said, what kind of rules do you want? And one boy said, well, I don't think there ought to be fighting in school. He's a little boy and he got beat up several times. They debated that for about 30 minutes because there was nothing those boys liked better than fighting, but they finally decided at least we won't fight on school property. And then he said, well, what other rule do you want? And one of them said, well, I don't think there ought to be any stealing. And everybody said, yeah, we hate thieves. No stealing. And they had a whole set. Finally, he said, enough rules. How about punishments? And somebody said, well, a boy caught fighting in school ought to have to chop wood after school. And they said, yeah, that's good because all the boys knew there was no wood in West Texas, and they were all right with that. Well, what about this stealing rule? Somebody said, anybody that steals ought to get 15 licks on a bare back with a hickory stick. And everybody said, yeah, we hate thieves. Well, the school year went great. All the way until one late, hot West Texas spring day, a lunch came up missing, and it was Big Tom's, and he was fit to be tied. And the teacher pulled out the rules, said, I didn't think we were going to need these, but somebody in here is a thief. And just as he's saying that, there's a little boy in the back of the classroom who's being picked up by the collar of his coat, and underneath him are the remains of Big Tom's lunch. The teacher says, son, you know the rules, 15 licks on a bare back with a hickory stick, come up here. And the boy hung his head and he started walking, and he said, please don't make me take off my coat. And for the first time, the teacher actually noticed he's wearing a really heavy coat that's too big for him. And it's a hot day. So he said, son, you know the rules, 15 licks on a bare back with a hickory stick. And he said, please don't make me take off my coat. So the teacher met him halfway and ripped the coat off the boy. And then he realized the boy didn't have a shirt on. He's obviously terribly malnourished. Every rib shows he's almost skeletal. And the boy said, my daddy died last year. And he said, on the day that Mama washes my shirt, I have to wear my big brother's coat. The teacher blinked back a few tears of his own, and he said, times are hard, son, but rules are rules, and the rules are 15 licks on a bare back with a hickory stick. Tom stood up, and he said, no, you're not going to do it to him. He said, he was hungry. I'm giving him my lunch. And the teacher said, sit down, Tom. He stole it before you gave it. He gets 15 licks on a bare back with a hickory stick. He said, you can't do it. He said, be quiet, Tom. Sit down. Tom sat down on that front row of the benches that were in that one-room schoolhouse. His knees were bobbing up and down. The teacher took the boy, laid him across the desk, pulled out his hickory stick, and Tom shot from the desk. The teacher thought he was going to hit him, but he didn't. He just shoved the teacher back, shoved the boy off the table. He flipped down the bib of his own overalls, and he said, you said 15 licks. You give them to me. I can take it. And while Tom took the 15 licks, the boy sat at the back of the classroom and cried and didn't understand why. Long ago, Jesus spoke up from the back of a classroom and he said, I know they deserve to die. I know they've broken the rules. I know they've been rebellious. Give it to me. Spit in my face. Lay open my bag. Nail me to a tree. Kill me. I can take it. And he took it and took it and died. That's why I want people to know about Jesus. And if you do too, I hope you'll be back. If you need to come and give your life to him, Jesus said, he who believes and is baptized shall be saved. Please do that. If you need to ask for prayer, he's faithful and just to forgive us our sins and to cleanse us from all unrighteousness. James chapter 5, verse 16. Come now, not to me, but to him while we stand and sing.